Retro.
Yeah.
Electro. Tech.
Oh yeah.
Hey, turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro electro tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Well, hello there once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electro Tech, and here on the bench is a pile of radio. It is a realistic model DX440. That's Delta X-Ray 440. It's a communications receiver. So, what appears to be going on, based on the customer complaint as well as my own findings thus far, involves connection issues primarily. So the customer was complaining about intermittent behavior in the controls, which I can see why. When I change camera views and zoom in close, when I start servicing things, you're going to see that there's a lot of dirt, dust, debris, fuzz, hair, and all that inside these sliders as well, these pots. So all these controls need to be flushed out, relubricated, and I'm sure that that's going to resolve that part of the problem. Another problem that I encountered was when I was function testing this unit and I was powering things up using the batteries. It appeared that things were a little bit intermittent there. I'm not talking about, intermittent signal, intermittent audio, but as far as the power up itself, things were a little bit intermittent, kind of cutting out there. And I attribute that to probably the connectivity between these contacts here, these tabs, okay, and the contact points, bear with me here, on the power supply board, okay. Those tabs made up with these contact points. So let me go ahead and get back out of here. So when looking inside of this battery pack, everything is clean, no battery leakage, anything like that. But I think that it's probably the way that these tabs are bent. I'm going to clean them up, of course, even though they look pretty good. I'm still going to just clean them up and bend them into position so as to hopefully make better contact with these contact points. Okay, so I'm going to start with that. And in testing things, I'm just going to I'm just going to use some jumpers. I'm going to clip onto these tabs, clip onto the power supply board to make sure that when I have batteries on board, I get this thing to power up and that the power up is stable. Nothing's cutting in and out there before I decide to close everything up and all that jazz. So if I have good connectivity with my jumpers between here and here, and everything powers up, then I know there's probably an issue going on with the way these tabs are bent and making contact with these points, like I already said. So in other words, I'm going to do a little messing around and jumpering and all that, and make sure everything's going to work. And then I'll play around with the tabs. So there's that. Also, too, I want to mention that when I went straight to the power supply board via the input jack on the board here, using a power supply, a wall wart, in other words, and plugged right in here. If you can see where I'm pointing. Excuse me, the cover kind of fell a little bit. No big deal. Nothing was hurt. But anyways, right here where I'm pointing, when I plugged on in and just used the wall wart, everything was good. It powered up fine. It was stable. I was able to tune in some stations, but again, the controls were really noisy and kind of intermittent and all that. So once I get the controls done and establish that with jumpers once again and good contact to the contact points of the power supply board, that the batteries are going to power it up okay, then I believe we're going to be good to go. So, as I go and move through here, I'm going to be checking other wiring, other cables, ribbon cables, make sure solder joints are looking good and all that. Gives us a good general clean out, get all the dust out of here, all that stuff, the usual. So that's what I'm going to start with, so I will be right back. So we're looking at the controls, and we have our sliders here, we have a couple pots, some switches. But the main thing I wanted to point out is how dirty it is in here. I don't know if you can see much detail, but yeah, everything's really dirty. I noticed some little pieces of dirt and debris, some fuzz in the actual sliders themselves. And around here, let me see if I could get some of this fuzz out. Yeah, I think you can probably see that on the camera. Yeah, I believe so. So stuff like that. That's what's in here. So I'm going to start with my little mini vac hose and just kind of suck out what I can, especially from these from inside the sliders here. And once everything's all cleaned up, I'm going to multi-flush everything with some contact cleaner, some solvent, whatever, and then reintroduce the appropriate lubricant. So on the topic of cleaning and lubricating the controls, I'm just going to touch on this very briefly. Yeah, when I perform a multi-flush with some contact cleaner, solvent, whatever, then yeah, I work the shafts repeatedly, flush again, and so forth. Same thing with the sliders until I'm satisfied that everything is clean and there's not going to be any more noise or intermittent behavior exhibited with the controls or from the controls. And then I will reintroduce the appropriate lubricant, like a drop or two of some fader lube, and work the shafts again, distribute the lubricant on the resistive tracks. Same thing with the sliders, although I don't always choose to apply a lubricant to the resistive tracks. And there's some people that will say, yeah, no, don't do that and whatever. But the reality is technicians in the recording industry that worked around the recording industry, recording studios, and did a lot of work or whatever on the consoles, mixers, and all that stuff, where you have mega sliders everywhere. Sometimes you have to make an executive decision on that as far as lubricating the sliders and where you want to target the lubricant. If you can target the shuttle, this part here, the shuttle that moves along its range of travel, and apply a really light smear of like some fader grease or a damping grease in there to just give that slider that certain feel and assist its travel and all that, well then great, there's not a problem. Sometimes with the resistive track you have to use a little bit of judgment. I will at times apply a very light sheen of like fader lube, more of like an oil, silicone based oil, something a bit on the thinner side, and just a very light sheen, literally just a sheen on the resistive track to just kind of protect the contact surfaces. In other words, the metal contact as it makes contact with the resistive track. Sometimes that's a good thing to do, especially when I determine that it feels a little bit rough. Sometimes the resistive track has kind of a gritty feel to it after years and years of use, wear and tear, whatever. And even after flushing everything out, sometimes it just feels like there's a few potholes that need to be filled in a little bit. And for me, I have no problem whatsoever because I know how much to apply and what to apply. You don't want to apply the wrong stuff, the wrong type of lubricant. And like I said, just literally a light sheen. And you don't just start dumping it in there. Just a light sheen, smear it on there nice and evenly. And then you're not going to have a problem with creating a sludge factory in there and attracting all kinds of filth and dirt, debris, and all that. So you don't want to go all lube daddy, as I say, and just start packing in grease and all that, because yeah, you're going to bog things down and make a real mess. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick because sometimes I make the decision to apply the appropriate lubricant, just a very, very light sheen on the resistive track, but most of the lubricant is applied to the shuttle, and once in a while I'll put a little touch of like a fader grease under the lip here, the metal lip. And especially if I don't have the slider, pulled off the board and have it disassembled. In that case, it's a lot easier, obviously, to target where to put the appropriate grease, fader grease or whatever. So, and even that, just a light smear like around the shuttle, maybe under the lip, just to aid the travel and to give it a nice damp feel. But otherwise, if you don't need to lubricate the resistive track because everything's smooth otherwise, you got it all cleaned out and everything's looking good, then that's fine. But if you do decide to use a little light sheen of, like fader lube, for example, just a little smear in there, or some other high quality silicone based oil, a very light viscosity and just a little sheen, and that's not a big deal. So I just wanted to point that out as sort of a tech tip, if you will, because some people wonder about what they should use and how much and all that. So just think your way through it and just be very careful how you go about it and what you're using. And there you go. So I'm going to change the camera angle, and I'm going to vacuum this out and start working these controls. I'll film a little bit of that. I'm not going to film the whole process of me going through doing each control. That's too redundant. So let me go ahead and get to it. Okay, so everything is cleaned up nicely. The interior of this unit, I went through with, the blower and the brush and just cleaned up all the surfaces, blew things out. You can see I have my, lens cleaner, microfiber cloth, cleaned up the display window. And as I go into reassembly a bit, I'll probably clean out a little bit more as I go if I notice anything, because I want the interior really clean. I don't want dust and debris and all that floating around or working its way back into the controls, of which responded really nicely to that multi-flush cleaning and relubrication. These sliders are as smooth as silk. And I got all the switches. Everything is good. So after I get everything reassembled, or at least start the process. Then I'm going to get over here and work on this battery pack over here, those contacts, and make sure that everything is looking good there and mating up with the, again, those contact points on the power supply board. So let me go ahead and start, reassembling and get that process underway, and then get into some final testing. So I will be right back. Everything is wrapped up. I just need to get the cover back on, but in quick review, I serviced the controls as I demonstrated in part. I talked about some do's and don'ts as far as the cleaning, relubrication of controls, in particular these faders, or any fader. So I'm not going to review that again. I just wanted to touch on that, but everything's squeaky clean, appropriately relubricated. I went through and touched up several solder joints throughout. Fortunately, there wasn't a lot of solder joints that were questionable. They all look pretty good. I use my usual method, and I'll just touch on that as a potential tech tip for some of you getting into this stuff. I talk about this every once in a while, where I go in with my magnified light. Let me shut that off. And study the boards with a magnified light, and in my mind's eye, I don't literally do it, but I break these boards into quadrants. I use a quadrant method so that I train my mind to kind of hone in on quadrants, because when there's a large population, especially when you're dealing with boards that have a really vast population of components on the backside, there's a ton of solder joints. Breaking boards into quadrants like that and examining quadrants helps some people. I know it helps me to hone in on questionable solder joints a little bit better, okay, without getting distracted. So it's not the be all and end all, to each his own on that, but it might be a method that helps some of you guys out. So in going through and examining the boards, yeah, I did find, and I might have mentioned that earlier, or maybe I didn't, that the input jack, the power adapter jack there, was questionable because of the intermittent behavior. I suspected there was a problem. So when I started moving that jack back and forth, that's when I discovered that there was a cracked solder joint, that one there. I don't know if you can see that. I could zoom in on it, but I'm not. It's not that important. But anyways, it was cracked, sure enough, down at the pad. So I bolstered up those solder joints, including several others that I found, and everything's looking good there. As far as the battery pack is concerned, I mentioned that these contacts here, it's springy, well, kind of springy metal a little bit, and I bent, let me get the correct angle. I bent these back into position because they were bent down a little too far, and one was kind of tilted a little bit one way, a little bit cattywampus, whatever. But these are bent back into position. I cleaned them nicely, and ultimately I went through and just continuity checked the battery circuit, made sure that everything was potentially going to work. I say potentially because I don't have 6D batteries in the shop right now. Not a big deal though. I know everything from here on is good because I checked it. I put power, I of course put power to it with my power supply, and just tested everything. Like I said, went through and just made sure everything was going to work, and it does. Now probably tomorrow I will run to the store and grab some D batteries, because when the customer comes to pick this up, I want batteries on board, and so I can show him that both with and without batteries, everything is working. Other than that, yeah, we're good to go. So let me get the cover back on, and then I will be back to start some testing with the power adapter. Okay, so here's the DX440 all put back together. I have a station tuned in on the 25 meter band, a shortwave band, and I think it's some Cuban radio station or something like that. And this time of day, there's really not going to be much out there.
Así que esta vez se ganó una batalla, pero no la guerra contra el tráfico de migrantes. Con ustedes en el especial de la Voz de América. Tras las huellas del país. Estimada audiencia, les saluda Judith Martín y es un privilegio verdadero dirigirme a ustedes una vez más.
And I'll go through the controls and show that there isn't any noise in the controls. Well, that's a balance
Un enorme abrazo.
slider there. Let me,
Lleno de bendiciones y sobre todo mucha.
the treble,
Hola, ¿qué tal? Les saluda Sara Pablo desde
bass.
México. Aprovecho estas fechas para enviar un abrazo a la audiencia de la Voz de América. Les deseo felices fiestas.
Okay. Our
Que la salud los acompañe siempre.
BFO control there. Let's see.
Desearles que la pasen en familia, disfruten y
So that was our beat frequency oscillator. Then we have the RF gain there.
año nuevo.
Hola, soy Silvia González, corresponsal del Perú.
Okay, so actually, I thought I heard that female say Peru. I don't know. Maybe it's Peru. I really don't know.
Feliz Año Nuevo.
Anyways, let me go ahead and switch over to FM. I'm not going to do all the other bands and all that. They're okay. So let me just switch over to FM, and there's probably music on the station, so I'm not going to camp on the station too long because of copyright stuff. But anyways. Okay, so there you go. Good enough. It's working. I'll get some batteries for it, like I said, so that when the customer comes, I can demonstrate it with the batteries and all that. Give it to them with some fresh batteries in it. The power adapter there is obviously powering the unit. One more thing I will say is that this unit has battery backup for the display and all that. It takes a couple AA's and then 6 D batteries on top of that, but I have a couple AA's in there. So you'll notice if I unplug the unit, it will hold the display and default to the time, the clock. So that shows that the AA batteries are doing their job and maintaining the display. So again, I know that the battery compartment is working, so that's where I'm going to leave this, guys. Anyways, like I always say, peace, love, music, or world broadcasts, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, y'all take care.
This is a poor man's shoe production.